we're building for India or for the world, and there are different challenges for both.
Name any big company, whether
Hmm.
it is healthcare, edtech, fintech, which doesn't have a development center here.
How does this mindset shift for a founder who has probably been in a service business to change it to now a product business?
That kind of a switch is very hard. It definitely takes multiple years to happen. I think we are still in a very, very flight mode. Most of the large companies, especially services companies, which are also attempting to do products, that kind of a culture shift, that kind of a mindset shift is not very fast. So it has to happen in all three sections: product, people, and processes to be able to transform.
How do you see the entire, products landscape changing with AI coming into picture?
Yeah, definitely all products are going to have in their positioning AI powered.
That's for sure. What are the biggest mistake product founders make when they're trying to create a product?
I think the first one is I know it all.
Today on the show, we have a guest who have trained more than 700 product managers. She has worked with over, I think, close to 10 startups. She herself, her led journey, with various large product companies, including PayPal, SAP, Intuit. And we all know these names. And, she's the one who's part of these product companies. And now with her learnings over the years, she has started mentoring a lot of startups. She has created, over 25, she has done over 2,500 hours of learnings or trainings for startups, for product managers. How I know her is even interesting. One of our product manager was even trained by her. Our current engineering head was also helped by her with respect to the product journeys. Let's welcome Malti. Hey Malti, welcome on the show. I'm so excited to talk to you because I personally treat myself as a product manager, and I've spoken to you, and I think your insights going to be so much refreshing for me to really understand a lot of basics again. You have helped a lot of my team members. It's first time I'm probably getting guidance from you. Super excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Ankit, for having me on this show. And in fact, in the last, the conversations that we have had, I have been amazed to just, hear it from a founder himself who wears the product hat, and it was very intense.
So, Malti, I'm sure you have seen the whole product journey evolving in last many years. Uh, how do you see this change has happened in last say 20 years? India moving from services to product companies.
I would say, I think if I mean, I started my own journey back in
Mm,
2009,
mm,
2010. From there to where we are today, I think we have gone through literally a very accelerated growth, right?
interesting.
Especially, I would say in the late post 2014, 15.
Mm,
I think with the whole Make in India,
mm,
with the kind of startup
mm,
ecosystem kind of coming together,
yeah.
it is really, really heartening to see that, because if I look at my slightly earlier journey of product management and
Mm-hmm.
building products in India,
Mm,
which is still today a large part, is basically a lot of GCCs, which are
okay.
building products for the world
Mm-hmm.
from India, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that has been where I think it kind of started to manifest. But
Mm,
I think in the last decade or more than that, Ankit, it has been this whole startup culture, which is, I think, kind of, getting into that mindset of building it from India,
mm,
getting that ecosystem together. I
mm,
think a lot of some of the government funding, I would say, ideas, or a
mm,
lot of engineering college coming together where they are kind of
mm.
incubating these things. So a lot of these things coming together, I think it has grown up multifold. And
Interesting.
I was recently reading, I think somebody had published that we have more than 1 lakh product management roles in India.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know how real is this
uh,
data, but
uh,
I definitely have seen, I mean,
uh,
in my own journey, last 6, 7 years, I've been mentoring a lot of product managers. So
mm,
the quality of work,
mm,
for example, the sensitivity towards driving decisions based on data,
mm,
the maturity with which we are taking decisions, the kind of product that we are making.
mm,
Look at
mm,
some of the biggest, for example, food delivery
mm, mm,
ecosystem, the kind of diversification, the kind
mm,
of competition that we see. I think it
mm,
is amazing. I think this is one of the, I would say, the most happening time in
mm.
India startup ecosystem.
Interesting, interesting. And what do you think was the tailwind? What made this happen, the shift? And even I agree. I passed on my engineering in 2009, and the kind of products we were looking at back then and kind of products we're looking at now, it's 15, 16 years now. It's like complete change.
Right.
What do you think was the tailwind?
So I think I would say there is definitely a lot of literature, there is a lot of
Mm.
inspiration which we have gotten from the Western world,
Mm.
right? And I would say a lot of, see, in India, for example, you talked about the services kind of set, right? And
Mm.
we have kind of moved up the value chain, right? So, for
Mm.
example, we were earlier doing only engineering jobs. We would have
Mm.
the BPOs, the operations job, right?
Mm.
Over a period of time, what has happened is that we all the organizations which have their centers over in India, the
Mm.
development centers,
Mm.
they have moved up the value chain. So now you have the product teams, the business teams co-located to the engineering teams, right?
Mm.
So what happens when there is those kind of roles start to descend in India? I think that also leads to moving up the value chain where people want to go more on the business side of things.
Mm.
That was one thing. The second thing I would say is the intervention of technology.
Mm.
Earlier, it was kind of a more a second class citizen where it was first business and then we look at technology. But
Mm.
now, with technology leading to be an enabler for the business, now what happens is people first look at that how can technology help this business to grow multifold.
Yeah.
For example, today we say that you look at AI if you
Mm.
don't want to grow linear, but you're looking at a exponential growth,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
I would say with technology advancement, and that is a kind of talent pool we have locally,
Mm. Mm.
right? With
Mm.
a lot of these, so I think that mindset has started to develop, right?
Interesting.
So I would say, and of course, as I spoke about in the last question, a lot of these things coming together, a lot of that kind of a mindset coming together,
Mm.
I think that is what has kind of nurtured this whole ecosystem.
And you know, there has been a different debate going on around products, that should India be building for India, or should product managers or business founders be building for India or for the world?
Hmm.
And there are different challenges for both.
Hmm.
What's your take on that?
I don't think we should change anything
Mm.
because we have the talent here. We have proven it again. I mean, name any big company, whether
Mm.
it is across industry, whether it
Mm.
is healthcare, edtech, fintech,
Mm.
which doesn't have a development center here, right?
Mm.
So there is no doubt that we have one of the best talents which is able
Mm.
to contribute towards that. And having said that, you know I do believe that while we have a very, very diverse set of segments within India, right? So
Mm.
that is why
Mm.
a lot of companies that you see that they started, even if they are able to solve for our population, even if they are able to solve for our own segments,
Mm.
that is a big enough market, is what they feel,
Mm.
right? But
Mm.
I don't see any reason why we should not be building for global,
Mm.
right? And I think that helps us to have a great cross pollination in
Mm.
terms of understanding the kind of challenges, the kind of scaling up, what it requires to operate a product of that size. In fact,
Mm.
if you ask me, I would love to see to have a new category creators like a WhatsApp or a
Mhm.
TikTok emerging out of India.
Yeah. Yeah. We all want that.
No, I think that is one thing, right? While I see a lot of startup founders picking up problem statements where they are talking about, of course, we have very, very viable, I would say, very,
Mm.
very deserving challenges,
Mm.
problems that needs to be solved for.
Mm.
But I think they can probably pick up more areas which
Mm.
nobody else is looking at. Of course, sustainability is one
Yeah.
big these things, but I think there is a fair amount of problems, whether it is in healthcare,
Mm.
education, sanitation,
Mm.
which are much larger problems, travel and
Mm.
traffic,
Mm.
which definitely can be
Mm.
solved with technology.
Mm.
I would look at more category creators and more startup founders focusing on these kind of real challenges.
Hmm. Interesting. Now, help me understand. Uh, India was the ground for a lot of services company. We still are.
Hmm.
And then they emerged a lot of new startups which started talking about products.
Hmm.
How does this mindset shift that you think required for for a founder who has probably been a service business to change it to now a product business? How what kind of shift do you think happens when somebody shift from service mindset to product mindset?
Okay, so first of all, let me tell you that kind of a switch is very hard. right?
Mhm.
It definitely takes multiple years to happen.
Mm.
See, when you are talking about large service organization, for
Mm.
them to become customer first or product first is a multi-year project.
Mm.
Just because the kind of legacy offerings that they have,
Mm.
the kind of roots, deep roots that they have,
Mm.
that it is not possible.
Mm.
Now, how does one at that scale operate to
Mm.
become product first or customer first?
Mm.
I think it has to trickle down from the leadership
Mm.
to the last engineer, to the last customer support person, to
Mm.
say that anything and everything that you do, think about what does it mean for my end customer,
Mm.
right? You don't have to kind of rush towards solving that problem, but you need to go back to, and it's common sense, right? We are not saying that you need to do something very quickly, while of course we would love to have the solution as quickly as possible, but some fundamental thinking, like, can you break down the problem what the customer is facing? Can you ask the fundamental question, what
Yeah.
exactly is the problem?
Yeah.
A lot of challenges with the services companies is that they jump into the solutioning phase, not only with services company, even today a lot of product companies, right? So that, while we would like to do that change, but bringing in such kind of processes, bringing in such kind of thinking where you apply first principles thinking, where you give enough time to identify the right problem, that is more from a process perspective. From a product, when I say people perspective, you really need to set up the organizational design in a way where people are kind of empowered to take decisions, right? They should be having tools like, let's say for example, design thinking, where they are able to think laterally, where they are able to go deep in order to do qualitative research, quantitative research, understand the customer much more deeply, right? So that is again a kind of mindset that you are thinking laterally. It is not something that is very natural for people to do that, right? Unfortunately, in our education system, we are not trained like that. We are not educated like that. So the second part that I was talking about is building an organizational design in a way where people are, it is okay to make mistakes, where people can learn fast by failing fast, right? Where people are asked to talk about decision making based on being not only gut, but also being more data driven, right? So for example, when I go and talk about in my trainings about North Star metrics, many people, especially from services to outbound, they are like, what are you talking about? People really do not understand. It's not about I release so many features. It is about what is the customer benefit that you are offering by whatever you have released, right? So going back to the part that I was talking, sorry, it's a slightly
No, it's
long
important.
answer.
It's important actually.
Yeah, it's a long answer. So I'm saying that in a larger company which is trying to transition or transform from being a service first to a product first, it has to happen in all three things. They need to upskill their people. They need to bring in I would say decision making. They need to bring in organizational design as part of their and they need to bring in processes. So it has to happen in all three sections: product, people, and processes, to be able to transform. And I would say the leadership team has to be at it all the time till they start seeing those green shoots coming up, saying that yes, the organization in the right path of creating that that mindset, right? And so that has to be the only way to sustain it. I think in a smaller organization, it is definitely possible because a lot of things there stays with the hands of the founders, right? And they are setting up a brand new company or a brand new organizations, right? Now, there also, I would say, as you grow, for example, when you grow from, let's say, 5 people to 20 people, how do you continue to sustain that DNA? Right? Now, everything that I spoke about, being customer first, applying your first principles thinking, breaking down your complex problems into more, palatable chunks so that you are able to see that what exactly, building those user journeys, really understanding that how is the customer solving the problem today, right? And I think one of the very important questions whenever you are kind of trying to build something, always asking the question, why now?
Interesting.
Why not tomorrow? Why nobody did it yesterday? Why is this the right time to do this? Right? I think asking some of those tougher questions, right? And as a founder, I would say you have to kind of do that constantly.
Hmm.
You need to lead it by role modeling that,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
spending that time to kind of building it up, iterating on your prototypes, iterating
Hmm.
on your MVPs, and being more data driven, right? For
Hmm.
example, 2010 2011, when I did my first product, that
Hmm.
was a B2B product.
Hmm.
When I the only way I could learn about my customers was talking to them,
Hmm.
or I would have these customer support tickets.
Hmm.
Apart from that, I had no clue who was my customer.
Interesting.
I had no data points,
uh, uh,
right? But today we cannot do like that,
yeah.
especially
Totally.
thankfully with
Hmm.
technology, with
Hmm.
SaaS products, it is much more possible.
Yeah.
But I think coming back to the just to kind of closing on this question, what I
Hmm.
would say is that a startup founder,
Hmm.
in order to bring in a product culture,
Hmm.
they need to embody the
Hmm. Hmm.
the tenets, or what we say, the traits of
Hmm.
a product first
Hmm.
founder,
Hmm.
and they have to constantly delegate, right? I mean, they should not become the bottleneck for
Hmm.
decision making. They
Hmm.
need to make their n minus one
Hmm.
to be embodying the same values, embodying the same traits,
Hmm.
so that the organization can be more frugal, they
Hmm.
can move fast, they can be more agile.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are a lot of interesting questions coming in my mind. I'll just trying to hold up and ask one by one. You know,
Sure.
the first question, let me objectify what I asked earlier. Let's imagine I'm a service business. Uh, let's give a number. I'm a service business which has, say, in terms of number of people, maybe 200 people,
Hmm.
service business. And then I, as a founder, have been aspiring to move to product.
Hmm.
I decide to carve out a small team,
Hmm.
5 people, 10 people, start building on product.
Okay.
What are the top mistakes people do doing this?
I think one of the things that they start doing is that uh, probably talk to a few customers,
Hmm.
and without really well understanding their market,
Hmm.
how big is the market, who could be the possible customer personas,
Hmm.
what are the possible target segments,
Hmm.
is this sector even growing,
Hmm.
and how is the customer solving the problem today.
Hmm.
A lot of times what I see is that they speak to a few people,
Hmm.
they form their hypothesis, and they jump into doing solutioning,
Totally. Totally.
right?
Hmm.
So I think we need to give some time. Obviously you can't
Hmm.
get into research for all the time. You
Hmm.
don't have that kind, nobody has that luxury.
Hmm.
But there has to be a thoughtful market research and user research
Hmm.
should be done
Hmm.
before you say that yes, this is the gap I identify,
Hmm.
this is the opportunity that I see
Hmm.
now, and get in all the data points in order to build your hypothesis.
Hmm.
Because if you are able to find the right problem,
Hmm.
I think it's like half the journey won,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
right?
And
So,
more important part of it, which you mentioned in the previous answer as well. Why now?
hmm,
Over the years, I realized, and when I'm advising any new entrepreneur, this is actually the question which I asked more than often now.
hmm,
Because a fundamental hypothesis which over the years I've been able to build, until there is a major shift happen, and there are a couple of shifts that happen, or a couple of changes that happen, either it's regulatory, it's technology, or some kind of political alignment change, etc., new opportunity doesn't emerge.
hmm,
And say, for example, if everything is continuing in the same way, same everything, why would somebody have not built this earlier?
correct.
Is a very fundamental question that I started asking. And uh, it took me years to realize that this is so powerful question. Often as a first time founders, we were lot capitalizing on our own um, strength, maybe, or
Hmm,
our own desire to do it, and more focusing on, look, I would be able to do it better kind of
yeah,
argument,
yeah,
rather than there's a tailwind, general market tailwinds, which helps decide where you gonna
absolutely,
go.
absolutely.
Now I would love to more understand on this why now thing. Why do you think this is, even I believe, but for the audience, why do you think this is the fundamental question, as you said, in your previous answer?
See, I think a couple of things, some very wonderful pointers that you put out, right? For
Hmm.
example, let's take a very, very prominent use case which is going around us, which is quick commerce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
I remember 3-4 years back, just during the
Mm.
COVID time, when
Mm.
we heard about Zepto,
Mm.
we said that really, is there even a use case that I
Mm.
will order something which I expect to come in 10 minutes?
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
But if I just step back
Mm.
and today look at it 4 years back,
Mm.
4 years later,
Mm.
we all are hooked onto it.
Mm.
We all expect it
Mm.
to come in, and now we have gone beyond. We not
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
groceries, we want our food, we
Yeah.
want everything, right?
Yeah.
To come in 10 minutes. So the primary question that it
Mm.
kind of grew the
Mm.
way it has
Mm.
grown in the last 4 years is
Mm.
because people have access to the technology, which
Mm.
is basically your
Yeah.
smartphones.
Yeah.
You have the kind of power that
Mm.
it needs in order
Mm.
to, in terms of your telecom, your bandwidth,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
Then there is this cusp of a new generation,
Mm.
which kind of, I would say, further aggravated by
Mm.
COVID,
Mm.
which is giving a lot of, we all are giving a lot of our time and
Yeah.
attention
Mm.
to the things,
Mm.
right? Overall, our, what do you say, the waiting time,
Mm.
right, has reduced,
Mm.
right? We
Mm.
all want everything now,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Then the intervention of technology
Hmm.
to be able to optimize the entire process
Hmm.
has gone multifold,
Hmm.
right? In terms of your supply chain, in terms of your operations. And then, especially in India,
Hmm.
as we talked about one of the question, labor availability,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it is, and then with, I think, the whole hype of so many
Hmm.
people's acceptability of to be able to use their phone in order to
Hmm.
do a variety of things,
Hmm.
right? And the regulatory bodies and the government kind
Hmm.
of, I would say, further
Hmm.
facilitating it,
Yeah.
has kind of all come together.
Hmm.
And that is, and the most important thing,
Hmm.
if we go back again a few years back,
Hmm.
the e-commerce market has been growing multifold,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
right? So I think that was the right time when
Hmm.
it kind of, even though it started as an idea,
Hmm.
it has literally revolutionized the entire commerce space.
Hmm.
So when you are looking at any kind of an opportunity,
Hmm.
you have to look at it 360 degree,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Why, for example, is India the right place to do this?
Hmm.
For example, if you just look at the demographics,
Hmm.
we are a country which is more than 60% people are below the age of 30.
Hmm.
Go to any other country in the world,
Hmm. Hmm.
they don't have this
Yeah.
demography.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Right? So one has to look at the demography.
Hmm.
One has to look at, is the market growing?
Hmm.
One has to look at, has somebody else tried it up?
Hmm.
Some has to look at what is the kind of support I could get from the ecosystem, which could be the governing bodies. This could be the funding, for example. That
Hmm.
again was a
Hmm.
huge enabler, right?
Hmm.
With all our,
Hmm.
this has all happened before the funding winter came in,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So what is the support that I can get ecosystem? Is there a way that I could quickly validate my idea?
Hmm.
So I would say, when somebody is thinking about an idea and
Hmm.
thinking that this might be the right hypothesis, these could be the lot of different
Yeah.
things one needs to look at.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. And beyond it, and I'll probably kind of put my words onto two part of it. So one, uh, see the why now thing. Like one of the thing that I say that anytime on any idea, there are like lakhs of people thinking,
Right,
thousands are trying.
right,
If something can be done, there would be people building it already.
correct.
You know, and only way people have not built it, it means they have not succeeded it. That's the more logical answer I have started believing.
Hmm.
And then if we are trying to get into that space, the fundamental question, what changed?
Hmm.
That's what I look at, and I ask a lot of entrepreneurs about the same answer. What changed?
Hmm.
That why do you think it's going to happen now, and what is the fundamental change that happened?
Hmm.
Now, addressing that to quick commerce, your points are very interesting. My hypothesis on that, and I strongly believe there were definitely the logistic and um, the last mile, thing and other things that changed. But more importantly, what changed during the COVID period was the acceptance. One, I need product at home.
Right.
Second, the payment behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the UPI, that moment during COVID, and everybody starting, was a pivotal for any
Correct,
quick commerce.
Correct.
Rest of the thing were, I think, still getting available with time.
Correct.
But payments, quick commerce especially was the pivotal moment.
Correct, correct. So these become the ecosystem levers that I was talking
uh,
about, right?
uh,
It's also about, because it's an entire journey.
yeah.
And as you said rightly, right? I mean, that whole India stack with the
Hmm.
UPI
Hmm.
was a huge enabler,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, absolutely. For
Hmm.
example, if you go to Africa,
Hmm.
the whole M-Pesa thing which they have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the people to be able to withdraw money from a merchant
Hmm.
to a nearby shopkeeper
Hmm.
was a game-changing thing. And why
Hmm.
that was the right time? Because there was a system which was setting up. They were able
Hmm.
to leverage the existing network of merchants who were
Yeah.
willing to do that, right? So
Totally.
it is kind of
Hmm.
changing in your user behavior,
Hmm.
ecosystem, technology, a lot of those things coming together.
Yeah. Yeah. So, up till 2022, and when a lot of startups, I was interacting with, were coming with a SaaS idea,
Mm,
this was getting more and more the question I was asking them that, look, anything that could have been built in SaaS is already built.
mm,
Even though I'm from SaaS, I started talking that language that, look, why nothing is built is a question I would rather ask.
mm,
Now there is a big lever that has come up, big change. That's AI.
mm.
And everybody's talking about it. How do you see the entire, products landscape changing with AI coming into picture?
Yeah, definitely. All products are going to have in their positioning AI powered.
That's for sure. I think it's already started. I think
Yeah,
we already
yeah,
see
yeah.
it everywhere.
Investors love to see that. The way I see it is that with now AI coming in,
Hmm.
I think what is going to happen is that there is going to be a lot of hyper verticalization,
Hmm.
right? That instead of you trying to solve, let's say, the entire CRM cycle,
Okay.
could there be certain section of, for a certain particular industry,
Hmm.
for a certain way of job, could you solve this problem really, really well,
Okay.
right? So that
Hmm.
becomes your differentiator,
Okay.
right?
Interesting.
And this is something because
Hmm.
I was actually talking about this in my podcast to
Hmm.
a couple
Hmm.
of growth accelerators.
Interesting.
And that is where they said that,
Hmm.
where AI could be leveraged is that for that particular certain industry,
Hmm.
can you bring in much more hyper verticalization?
Hmm.
That is one aspect.
Hmm.
The idea here is that you have these multiple services.
Hmm.
See, we all are now going towards the API first, or
Yeah.
the services oriented architecture. It's already
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
What we are looking at is that how do we make it easy
Hmm.
for these applications to be able to talk to each other,
Hmm.
and each one of them is kind of going in an expert mode, really going deep in
Hmm.
terms of making this automated,
Hmm.
right? That's number one. Number two, I think personalization. We all love the
Hmm.
more our apps know
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
right? The quickly I'm able to find what I'm looking for,
Hmm.
quickly I'm able to order what I'm looking to order
Hmm.
for, and we
Hmm.
are willing to give as much data that they
Hmm.
are asking for.
Hmm.
So I think that is another aspect
Hmm.
where we are able to leverage the data that we are harnessing,
Hmm.
where AI is able to do much more deeper
Hmm.
hyper personalization,
Hmm.
right? That is number two that I'm looking at.
Interesting.
The third thing where I see is, for example, this was something which again I was talking in one of my earlier episodes, was that
Hmm.
I was talking to a marketing leader.
Okay.
And see, we all have seen with COVID,
Hmm.
there are businesses which came online.
Hmm.
But when COVID went away,
Hmm.
we realized that those are not permanent habits,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So those have gone from online to also have an extension in offline.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can I, as much as I know about this user,
Hmm.
how do I kind of continue to give a very seamless omni-channel experience for
Hmm.
this user?
Hmm.
That comes still under the personalization bucket.
Hmm.
But what is that I need, and how AI can harness, whether it is, if this person is going to an offline store
Hmm.
through IoT or whatever are the sensors through which I'm able to gather, or through the phone, through the
Hmm.
app, I'm able to gather more data,
Hmm.
so that this person, when now is trying to interface with me using a mobile app,
Hmm.
I already know what this person was looking for.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah.
Right? So the way I see is that it is going to be much more the era
Hmm.
of hyper personalization.
Hmm.
It is going to be much more an era where we are going to talk about hyper verticalization,
Hmm.
going much more deeper in terms of the problem. And that is where I see that probably certain areas, let's say within healthcare,
Hmm.
manufacturing, maybe even in edtech,
Hmm.
right? Where for example, in rural areas and things like that. I don't know if you have heard about this Vinod Khosla's 10-bed ICU.
Oh, haven't yet. Huh.
Yes, so that's an amazing experience of how they have leveraged a doctor who's sitting miles away
Oh.
to be able to take care of a
Hmm.
patient
Hmm.
sitting. So they basically have only 10 beds in the ICU
Hmm.
in a certain place.
Interesting.
And they are connected through the devices and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So that is the kind of impact that I would say AI is able to bring in.
Interesting. So you're giving me a very different take of how AI is emerging, a lot of which I agree with, but then there is a other talk of the town.
Hmm.
Is SaaS dead? How do you compare these two extremes of it?
I mean, I think this has become definitely very clickbaity. And see, definitely, I don't think, I mean, see, with every new technology
Uh,
coming in,
hmm,
I would say it has, whatever is there
hmm,
has evolved for
hmm,
better,
hmm,
right?
yeah.
So there is no way that SaaS is dead. I think
Hmm,
we are still not even reached a maturity stage of SaaS.
hmm,
But what I see, as I was saying earlier, with
hmm,
hyper verticalization and
hmm,
things like that,
hmm,
what I see is that AI can power SaaS big time to
hmm,
evolve,
hmm,
right? And what
hmm,
I would say is that now SaaS becomes more like AI powered SaaS.
hmm. Interesting. But for sure, a lot of the kind of product or SaaS product that we see right now, I don't think that's going to be the same, at least from how we interact with them, how we interface with them, or how we use currently. That's going to be same. There is a major shift happening. Now,
True.
the real question, I think, is do we call it SaaS or do we call it AI agents, maybe?
Yeah, that's a new beast. Of course, I think all of us are kind of
Hmm,
getting bombarded with a
hmm,
lot of new things, especially with the agentic AI framework
hmm,
coming in.
hmm,
So I do believe that there is a huge opportunity with the
hmm,
kind of the predictive analytics or the kind of automation that
hmm,
AI can do.
hmm,
I definitely believe that within the SaaS, for example, if you just take a workflow, there could be a fair amount of activities within
hmm,
that workflow
hmm,
that can be completely be automated,
hmm.
right?
Got
So
it.
I think at least when I heard Satya
Hmm,
Nadella talking
hmm,
about, or I heard Mark Benioff talk about the digital workforce
hmm,
in
hmm,
the coming era,
hmm,
I definitely see that within a SaaS paradigm,
hmm,
if there are low value activities or more predictable,
hmm,
repetitive activities which are there, or even semi intelligent activities which
hmm,
can be automated using
hmm,
AI agents,
hmm,
I think that is going to take a greater part.
hmm,
And that will, I think, will complement
hmm.
in terms of making these SaaS products even better, so that
Interesting.
we can
Hmm,
focus, bring in the human intervention or human intelligence
hmm.
in more high value activities.
Got it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's how I see.
Absolutely.
So it
So
has to be I
hybrid.
think we need to agree that the
Hmm,
coming era or the coming decade
hmm,
is going to be a co-pilot,
hmm.
if we call this digital workforce
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
co-pilot,
yeah.
assuming that they will be able to augment what
Ah,
we can delegate to them, so
hmm,
that we can focus on more high value work.
hmm. Interesting. Now let's go to the other side of the discussion, which is uh, founders building, the product culture, the customer focus, culture around products, etc. So, uh, what are the biggest mistake product founders make when they're trying to create a product?
I think the first one is, I know it all.
Hmm.
I think we need to be in that space where we are constantly willing to. So there is one phrase which I love, right?
Hmm.
Whether it's just founders or product
Hmm.
people, is like strong opinions weakly held.
Okay.
Okay, see,
Mm-hmm.
as founders,
Hmm.
as product people,
Mm-hmm.
we always have a point of view,
Hmm.
right? And the idea of building a product is that you're not building a product for yourself. You may
Hmm.
be convinced about it, but
Hmm.
you need to always make sure that you are kind of listening to people around you.
Hmm.
You are making sure you are empathetic towards what your customer is saying. So the
Hmm.
whole meaning of this phrase is that you may have strong opinions,
Hmm.
but hold it weakly, so that you give a
Hmm.
point, everybody else to share that point of view, and then you kind of further build on that.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting.
So coming back to that, I think one of the key things that I would always recommend
Hmm.
founders, especially those who are kind of leading the products, is that it is okay to be always, have strong opinions,
Mhm.
but be very open minded to listen from others,
Hmm.
right? But at the same time, not at the cost of delaying your product
Hmm.
releases,
Hmm.
right? So that is the first one.
Hmm.
The one challenge which I see is that, especially when you have kind of done your MVP.
Hmm.
This is something probably I'll say that some of the startups with whom that I work with, especially I mentor a lot of product managers,
Hmm. Of
right?
course. Huh.
And one thing which they say just all in light mode is that my founder met somebody, my founder had this aha moment
Hmm.
where they decided that this is what we should build,
Hmm.
right? Just
Hmm.
purely based on their gut,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
probably no actual
Hmm.
data to back it up.
Hmm.
And they said that every single day now I have a new priority given to me,
Hmm. Hmm.
that this is what we should ship,
uh, uh,
right? While I having worked with some really fantastic founders, I do believe that they are in the thick of the things.
hmm.
But I think it is always important to separate yourself from the
Hmm.
product.
Hmm.
So there is another verbiage which I really
Hmm.
love is that don't fall in love with your solution, fall in love with the problem,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right? So it takes a lot to deassociate yourself
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
solution,
Hmm.
right? From the feature.
Hmm.
Look at the problem in a more wider spectrum
Hmm.
from a customer's perspective,
Hmm.
and helping your teams
Hmm.
to not kind of constantly, because it leads to a lot of churn,
Yeah.
right? Churn for the product team,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So have some kind of a methodology, of
Hmm.
course, especially when you are in an early stage. You bound to have maybe something that you built very very passionately yesterday, you have to
Hmm.
just throw it away,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But at the same kind, have some kind of a, I would say, mechanism
Hmm.
which makes it predictable, saying that if this is the vision, if this is the roadmap,
Hmm.
I understand maybe 30% will change,
Hmm.
35% will change, but 100% cannot change just
Yeah.
because of certain insights, right?
Absolutely.
So, so that is one thing. The other aspect which I would say is that when you are creating your products, look
Hmm.
for options if you could co-create it with your customers,
Hmm.
right? Because the likelihood that
Hmm.
your customers will adopt it
Hmm.
if they are co-creating, like there was one of my ex-colleague,
Hmm.
he left the job. It was very interesting. He
Hmm.
incubated his startup
Hmm.
in one of his customers' office,
Okay.
and
Hmm.
they created the product together.
Hmm.
And it's been about 4 or 5 years now,
Hmm.
and they are it's a edtech product, a school
Hmm.
management platform.
Hmm.
Today, because they co-created that product with one of the schools,
Hmm.
the acceptance level and
Hmm.
their ability to grow across schools is very very high.
Hmm.
So if it is possible, find that advisory council, find those
Hmm.
group of customers
Hmm.
who could be your innovators.
Hmm.
In your product
Absolutely.
adoption curve, you always have those innovators who
Hmm.
could be your these things. So I would say those are some of the primary things,
Hmm.
especially for a founder, especially those with a product mindset,
Hmm.
to kind of keep in priority.
Interesting. Interesting. See, I, like a lot of statements, a lot of questions. I'm critical about some. Let me start with one. So one thing that you said, and you beautifully presented it, that we hold the problem very closely, not the solution, and then at the same time, holding your idea, but keep holding it weakly. So the other way I generally ask, especially my product managers or even other entrepreneurs, or I always say this to imbibe in myself, is like critical thinking.
Hmm.
Even I believe in it, I question.
Right.
And that's how
Absolutely.
fundamentally questioning everything, even something which is very, very fundamental.
Right.
You know, uh, uh, Something which might have I believed for a long time, I sometimes sit back and then question the very fundamental of itself. I realize most founder or even product managers, this critical thinking, and I've started believing that critical thinking one of the major
Yes.
competency
Correct.
that people need to develop to be a product manager or a product
To
founder.
be a good product manager.
Because then you are able to analyze everything that you believe from a perspective,
Correct.
but then also bring it to second part of it. See, I when I initially built this business, I built on less data, but again, the wrong way of doing it. Talk to few customers, built a hypothesis, built around it. Then I started focusing a lot on data, and today I've gone back from data to conviction.
Hmm.
I understand there is a balance that is needed. We
Correct.
have to balance with data. We have to balance with a lot of things. But at the same time, at the end, what matters is conviction.
That's
And
true.
you just don't have to. You should not have a conviction which is based on whims and fancies.
Correct.
The
I agree.
conviction has to be some data thing, etc. But at the end, it's again conviction that
Correct.
drives everything.
That's true.
And off late, I've become more of a founder. It sees data, but do not trust every data.
Hmm.
And then, say a lot of things which are very counterintuitive. And I say this is based on conviction. And also with my product teams, this is our debate.
Hmm.
We might debate on a lot of topics. And at the end, I'll be asking, what is your conviction?
Hmm.
I understand you know the subject, but what is your conviction?
Hmm.
If somebody has a strong conviction, I might let the person decide.
Hmm.
Or if I have a strong conviction, whatever way, I decide. But I need one person to have a strong conviction around it.
Hmm.
And at the end, I'm driving now by conviction. So it's more like a bet thinking, thinking in bets, etc. So that's another critical way I've started thinking that it's not entirely data. It's like more of a critical thinking and the bets that you decide. How do you bridge these two things together?
Yeah. So I think very, very well articulated, Ankit, right? And I completely,
Hmm.
because for example, a lot of my students, they come to me, right, when we especially give any capstone project, ma'am, we don't have data. I said, you need to look at proxy ways where you can formulate your hypothesis, right? Because especially when you're starting something brand new, you will not have data, right? Let's say, especially you are a new business model, you're doing a completely new market, you don't have data. So here is my take on that. Absolutely right. Conviction. You need to be, when everybody else is saying this is not the right problem to solve, but if you have the conviction, something is telling you that you got to go for it, I would say go for it. But at the same time, I think another important mindset which needs to be there is that I'm willing to experiment, right? You need to have something which, so some of the things, while conviction is a very important thing, I think it needs to be supplemented by a few more things. Have you done enough risk analysis, for example?
True.
Right? Why will people adopt this product versus why people will not adopt? Right? Have you understood the ecosystem? Have you understood the space well? Because if you go without doing that homework of looking at the market, understand, and without understanding what could be the risk, what could be the other important trait that I look for product managers beyond everything else that you said is that experimentation. That while I'm convinced about it, I am going to experiment it for a few weeks, few months, whatever is the time horizon that you. But if this does not work, so that way you have some kind of a, like a measurement.
Testing the hypothesis.
Exactly. Right? So I completely am with you that we cannot, go into either of the spectrum of only a conviction without any data point. Similarly, I don't want to go into an analysis paralysis where I'm just looking at data for weeks together and not taking a decision. It has to be a balance of both, but again with an attitude that I experiment. This is what I am looking at as success. If this works, I move forward, else I pivot or I close it, whatever it is. Right?
Absolutely.
I'll tell you one of the one of the things, right? In one of the companies where I had worked in, there was some very, very strong data insights. So we were basically seeing a shift in our demographics of the customers. That also said that what is the kind of devices that they are using, how they are using the product. So we saw a great opportunity over there. Okay. And we decided, okay, we are going to do this experiments. We created a quick wrapper product within 8 weeks. And then we went with a very, we all loved the aspect. We said, oh, this is probably a new revenue stream. This is going to be a new product line that we could launch and stuff like that. But we had some very clear metrics. 8 weeks, we developed it. We ran the experiment for 6 weeks. Okay. There were all green shoots leaning towards, that likelihood that our experiment is successful. But then when we looked at the overall result, we stepped back. We said, if we want to go this direction, one of the biggest risks is that we will have to create a completely new tech stack.
Interesting.
Okay, so today I already have 2 tech stacks which I'm supporting, desktop as well as mobile. Now, if I go for this, I also have to support a 3rd tech stack. Then if I'm looking at it from a longer term perspective, what is the kind of ROI that I'm looking at? And when we started to bring in lot of these other aspects, it did not seem like a profitable venture.
Yeah.
Right? So all I'm trying to say is that you need to have this weightage of what does it mean from a long term perspective? Is it aligning? Is this the market growing? So I think conviction is definitely as the core of it, but these other elementary things
Absolutely.
could be your big headwinds. Something which
Yeah.
is a small headwind today,
Yeah.
right, could become a big headwind tomorrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And very rightly, because, what I would prefer the way you said it rather than even I said it, because I know if I just say conviction, a lot of first time founders gonna misuse it, saying that, oh, I have a conviction, I don't know about data. I probably, and that's a more common pitfall
Yeah.
than, data and not a conviction. I definitely think that's a better way of thinking around it. Now let's talk about, bit of culture, and especially founders trying to create a product team and the culture around it. And when I'm saying culture, the first and foremost part of the culture, how to be thinking about customer problem at
Hmm.
the very core of it.
Hmm.
Because uh, at the end of the day, when we as a founder create teams, even couple of people, we get swayed away by a lot of other things and forget the core fundamental problem. You yourself mentioned that at the end it's a problem which is important, but we get
Correct.
swayed away by everything else.
Correct.
We'll get swayed away by design prioritizations and all the pipelines that's happening. How do you really build the culture?
Hmm. I think the first thing I would say is that have people identify who could be your accountability partners,
Hmm.
right? Where each one of them is like counter checking. For example, the founder could
Hmm.
have the co founder saying that, hey, you know what, you become my accountable checker. You probably might be the COO, but you keep a check whether how we are doing from a culture perspective, or bring in some kind of an evangelist.
uh,
This could be a consultant. For example, that's
uh,
one thing which I do as a fractional CPO is
Interesting.
that I become like that checker
uh,
who says that how are we doing from a product culture perspective,
hmm.
right? So I mean, that is more in a lighter note.
Hmm.
But having said that, I think there are some fundamental aspect, and this takes a lot of conscious and mindful adoption of
Hmm.
these practices,
Hmm.
right? But I understand, when you're in a hustle mode, you just want to kind of
Yeah, yeah.
ship,
Hmm.
and a lot of important things related to culture
Hmm.
kind of goes under the carpet,
Yeah.
right? So this takes a lot of, I would say, mindful practicing. Somebody has to constantly remind. This could be somebody
Yeah.
in HR, this could be a co-founder, whoever it is.
Hmm.
So coming back to what are some of the things, right? I mean, have some aspect of your product team's time
Hmm.
carved out
Hmm.
only for talking to customers,
Hmm.
right? Upskill them, give them the responsibility to present those dashboards,
Hmm.
look at those dashboards and ask them, okay, tell me this week
Hmm.
what is one of the key insights that you had based on what we have shipped. So one challenge which I see, Ankit, from a lot of startups is that they become feature factory, right?
I
They
know.
believe that, oh my god, my customer, I need to give this also, I need to give that also. What happens in that pursuit is that they are not measuring of how the customer is using what has already been shipped.
Hmm. I've done that mistake.
Right. Yeah, and I understand, right? Because we are all in a hustle, we are all excited, we have the
Uh,
the adrenaline pump of
uh,
shipping something to our customers
uh,
going up. But I think that is where, as a founder,
hmm.
especially being somebody who's a very product oriented,
Hmm.
customer first, is that taking a pause,
Hmm.
constantly looking at how is our customer using what we have shipped, right? So
Hmm.
I think one of the most important thing, so one of the things which I have seen some very strong customer first organizations, even if
Hmm.
after they have scaled up to
Hmm.
50,000 people, do
Hmm.
really well is that have those processes in place,
Hmm.
have those time reviews in place, which allows your product team, your engineering team, to go and talk to customers.
Hmm.
This could be
Yeah.
just listening to calls.
Yeah.
This could be just going and meeting customers on the field.
Hmm.
This could be just talking to the proxy teams like sales team, customer support team,
Hmm.
in order to understand what customers are saying,
Hmm.
right? So that is something number one.
Hmm.
And also putting it as part of their appraisals,
Hmm. Yeah.
putting it as part of their responsibility.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because once you do that,
Hmm.
I'm suddenly, if it is there in my charter that in the next 3 months, I have to talk minimum to one customer every day,
Hmm.
I will make a point to do that.
Yeah.
That's number one.
Hmm.
Number two, I think something which I said earlier, putting in some kind of a prioritization mechanics,
Mm.
which, operating mechanics, which says that not everything that I say, directly has to go into your backlog to be done in the next 2 sprints.
Mm.
But helping, it's kind of also, I would say, helping them to go through some kind of a process which says, okay, give me all the urgencies, give me all the details of why something should be done or not. So
Mm.
having some kind of a buffer around that, so that the
Mm.
teams are able to operate without getting bombarded with these ad hoc requirements,
Mm.
that is, I think, something that really protects the product teams to be able to deliver what they have thought
Absolutely.
through.
Mm.
Because see, as product team, especially being
Mm.
customer first culture,
Mm.
which I really feel that product team needs to do, is deep thinking.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you are just constantly moving from one meeting to another, if you are just shipping something every single week,
Mm.
I really think that you have not got enough time to do deep thinking,
Yeah.
to be able to think about all the scenarios.
Mm.
Right? So, can you build around a culture where
Mm.
people can voice their opinions?
Mm.
Can you bring about a culture where people have access to data?
Mm.
Can you build around a culture where people do not feel shy or do not
Mm.
feel scared to voice their opinions and say, maybe we should not do look at that? So,
Mm.
I think empowering them,
Got
if,
it.
if there is
Mm.
one word which I do feel a
Mm.
product customer first culture companies should do, is empower their teams.
Mm.
And the
Interesting.
other very important thing is more from the way the teams are structured.
Mm.
Can you make smaller teams so that they are looking at very focused? Because the one thing which I have seen, having led large product teams,
Mm.
the more focused your team is without 100 other what do
Mm.
you call those distractions,
Mm.
the better they are at bringing
Yeah.
out results.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, can
And
you have one layer of leaders who could help these product teams to be able to really focus,
mm. Yeah.
right? And have the appetite to innovate. Because,
Mm.
see, that is another, because it is not about that you go and hear your customers and you are just thinking, what are the kind of, capability, what I would say, practices that you are
Mm.
allowing
Mm.
your teams to be able to do that deep thinking so
Mm.
that they are able to innovate better.
Mm.
So, how do they can continuously innovate? So, continuous
Mm.
discovery, continuous innovation. I think
Mm.
these are some very important pillars
Got it.
for a customer first culture.
Absolutely. See, one factor which you mentioned in the conversation, uh, listening to customers or sitting with customers, and then becoming the feature factory. One of the way we became feature factory
Hmm.
because we were listening to a lot of customers
Hmm.
without being very critical about it.
Hmm.
Listening to customer is important, but at the same time we have to be very very critical about it,
Yeah.
because if you listen to customers, they'll always keep asking about the next feature,
Correct.
and without a proper set of critical people
Hmm.
who really question these, that is it really needed, and we say no, we don't want to build this, etc. It's a disaster. And
Correct.
that's what happened with us. We were taking pride in calling ourselves, oh look, we are such a customer first, we ship in this time, and we keep on implementing new features or ship out new features in this time because we're listening to customer. But then eventually we realized it wasn't a good idea,
Yeah.
because we built so many features which are used by just 10%, 5% of the customers, and not really the larger base of it.
Correct.
And having that with a lot of sense of criticality and that in mind or structure, it's actually disaster. One way we do it right now, and started loving more critical people in team.
Hmm.
Like earlier where I wanted everybody to be positive about it. Then I realized people critical actually they helps a lot shipping up this
Yeah.
entire thing.
True.
Now on the other side now, even though we ask our product managers to talk to customers, another way which has helped us is
Hmm.
have one person,
Hmm.
and that again somebody who's able to summarize and understand context and structure, ask questions as a voice of customer.
Hmm.
Because even though product managers are talking to it, they're always talking to a very limited amount out of it.
Hmm.
They're not able
Correct.
to structure by talking to many. So there's one person in our team whose entire job is to just keep talking to customers,
Okay.
solving their problems, understanding what is happening, analyzing different data.
Right.
Then this person's is entirely on like critical side of it, is always asking question: is this useful? Is this not useful? This is what customer needs. This is what he said. What is happening? And then have a weekly meeting from this person to the entire product team, that what is needed.
So it becomes like a proxy for the customer.
Yeah, because definitely it's very important to choose that person rightly. We were only able to do it because we found one person we realized is fit for this role. Otherwise, it's a disaster again.
Correct.
You know?
So I have actually a anecdote in, this was quite some time back. I was hosting a panel discussion and I was the moderator.
Mhm.
And I had one of the speakers in my panel say that, listen to your customers. And I then have another panelist saying that don't listen to your customers.
I've been on the both side.
So, that was a very tricky
Ah.
slope for me that day. Now, when I reflect back, it's in a lighter note. But exactly as you said, right?
Ah.
Because, see, we are like the doctors and the customers are just telling us the symptoms. And if you
Exactly the
ask
same.
them, they want everything. But
Mm.
tomorrow, because, see, that is also important aspect is that when you are talking to your customers,
Mm.
how are you even phrasing your questions?
Mm.
If you are
Yeah.
going to say that, we are building this, will you buy that? Believe me, no customer will say no,
I know that.
right? And that is where I would say having a user research team in house or, just hiring somebody to do that goes a long way. And in fact, if possible, upskilling your product managers to frame the questions in a right way, right? So that they are not looking at a confirmation bias when they are talking to the customer is a very important aspect.
Yeah.
In fact, I have another aspect that I want to kind of talk about, and that is where product managers, while they are listening to the customers, they are kind of building as you said, the voice of the customer.
Yeah.
They become the representative of the customer.
Mm.
But I think that is where this whole viability, they are, from a customer perspective, all they are doing is looking at desirability. What does a customer desire?
Yeah.
Right? One of the things which I also believe product managers need to have very sharp acumen is the business acumen.
Mm.
Right? They might be asking for 100 things.
Yeah.
But what is viable from a business perspective?
Mm.
Is this market big enough?
Mm.
Is nobody else looking at this problem? Is this a problem that one customer is asking versus how many customers are asking?
Mm.
Will I be able to make revenue out of it? So, mapping that viability to the desirability along with the feasibility aspect, right? I think is a very important aspect for a product manager to constantly balance upon.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that it has worked for me in the past, I've kind of also is that when your product team, exactly like as you said, have somebody who's voice of the customer. I have typically seen a product manager meeting frequently with the customer success team, with your sales team, with your engineering team. And the idea is, again, as a customer first culture, is to have a healthy debate. And again, I'll keep going back to the data point. But the more you talk, you are able to gather whether is it really as critical a problem. For example, I remember our sales team will say 20 million का डील होना है, ये अभी करना है, इसके लिए जो भी करो प्रोडक्ट रोड मैप में डाल दो. Right? So, see, for them the motivation is something else.
Yeah.
But if I have to do this, that means something else has to go from the backlog.
Yeah.
Right? So, what is that trade-off? And this is where, if I go back to Ankit, what I was saying, that can you empower your product team to take those decisions just in the light of the data, the gut, and the various touch points that they have captured, the domain knowledge that they have built up over the time with that product. That is where that kicks in. And the whole point of the conviction that you were talking about, that will take a precedence because now they kind of know a lot of information and they are able to synthesize it.
Totally. See, one way, I'll not say maybe perfect there, but at least, last couple of years, I've been able to really build that kind of mindset of business among the product managers. One way I realized, we were able to do it is held product managers accountable or set the KRA till the distribution, not just building and shipping.
Makes sense.
And the question I ask, you build and ship and then measure what is the ROI.
Correct.
It's your job.
Correct.
I'll be analyzing each product managers based on the ROI. You invested this much time, effort, and resources. What is the ROI? Because when they start thinking about distribution, everything changes.
Correct.
And their prioritization and everything, they start asking more questions about it and get more diligent about it.
Correct.
And that way shaped us our product team, and they started asking these questions. Okay, I'll develop, but tell me what do you? They start asking these questions to sales team.
Correct.
I'll develop this feature, but tell me what is the ROI.
Correct.
And then they started asking, how many people will use it? Is it 5%? Is it 50%? And really
Correct.
matters that.
Correct.
And at the same time, a lot of these cultural thing. Now, what I'm just sharing here. A lot of these cultural thing, I realize it's tough to build initially, but once you build, it's also it's likely to continue even if people changes.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's what we see with team now, that anybody new joining in even learns that art, that this is the way I have to operate.
Correct.
And that's become the
That
organizational
becomes
memory.
the DNA. That
Yeah.
becomes the DNA. And
Yeah.
that becomes a muscle memory.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
true. Yeah. No, that's true. And that is why, if I go back to the original question,
Hmm.
that when you are small, it is far more easier to, you're just sitting across with your team members across the table.
Hmm.
The whole collaboration becomes easier. But imagine when you're scaling up, you have a team
Hmm.
of 50 people.
Hmm.
It's not that easy, right? So
Hmm.
it is important that when you are scaling up,
Hmm.
to set up some of these values, set up some of these processes, set up some
Hmm.
of these ways of working,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Carved out,
Hmm.
so that doesn't matter whether it is any new person coming in, it will operate like a charm.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I've learned about this organizational memory after building it so many years. I realize, whatever you change, it become a memory of the organization. I
I
never used to
agree.
think about that, but running a company for now many years, I realize this is a real thing. And,
I
you
agree.
should set up a lot of these things early. The longer it takes, the difficult it is to changing in
True.
the memory.
True. No, that's right. Especially when you're looking to scale up, you
Mhm.
want to do so many things at the same time.
Hmm.
And at that point of time, setting up the culture is very hard,
Yeah.
because you want at that time, you are in full momentum, you want to grow, you want to do that. So the earlier you are able to do this,
Hmm.
the better it is.
So, Malti, product management is a lot about tools as well,
Hmm.
because you keep on using a lot of other products to enhance your decision making, your analytics, your capability to execute, etc. I see product team, I think, one of the most product user even at our end. What are some of the tools that you love and you want product managers to really use it? And you've seen great product managers getting outcomes with it.
Yeah. I think prior to the GPT era,
Hmm.
I would say, I think Jira, all product managers love.
Hmm. Hmm.
They have a love hate
Love hate relation,
relationship with that.
yeah.
Yeah. And same with the Microsoft Office, or,
uh,
this thing.
uh,
So I think that's, I would say, like given,
okay.
right? But in order to kind of, in the last couple of years, right, especially with the whole GPT thing coming in,
Hmm.
and I'm somebody who really, really uh, insist my product teams to focus a lot during the design and the discovery phase,
Hmm.
right? So you have so much of data. How are you kind of, discovering? How are you
Hmm.
building, synthesizing your insights,
Hmm.
right? So I definitely ask my teams to kind of look at, and I
Hmm.
think for brainstorming, for
Hmm.
synthesizing competitor information,
Hmm.
a lot of this I have
Hmm.
found ChatGPT to be huge,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
I do
Hmm.
that day in and day out.
Hmm. Hmm.
Interestingly, we were debating, for example, with
Hmm.
one of the startups, in order to how much time should we spend on building PRDs.
Hmm.
One of the tools which we seem to have found
Hmm.
decently good enough. Again,
Hmm.
I would say product manager still needs to do the thinking and the writing,
Yeah.
but Chat PRD seems to be a great tool,
Hmm.
which is helping product managers. I've personally reviewed it
Interesting.
after my teams created product requirement document using Chat
What is
PRD.
the name?
It's called Chat PRD.
Chat PRD. I would love to use that, explore it here.
Yes. The other thing, again, I have not tried it firsthand,
Hmm.
but I hear a lot from my team is that, for example, some of the new plugins which have come in Figma,
Hmm.
so for example, one tool which I very, very extensively personally use
Hmm.
is Miro.
Hmm.
Okay, whether
Hmm.
it is to do my user journey, whether
Hmm.
it is to do my roadmaps,
Hmm.
whether it is to do my,
Hmm.
storyboarding,
Hmm.
or just brainstorming with my team,
Hmm.
or for that matter, when I'm doing,
Hmm.
trainings and workshops, Miro board is like given for my trainings,
Hmm.
because that helps you, that never ending canvas.
Hmm.
It kind of just is like your imagination.
Hmm.
So it's a wonderful brainstorming tool.
Hmm.
Okay. Then some of the other things which I ask my product team to do is basically use, as much as possible, it could be Miro, they use Marvel to do at least some kind of a low fidelity prototypes on your own with the
Hmm.
new, I think, capabilities that you have, Figma
Hmm.
and Miro and Canva.
Hmm.
They are able to do some of these low fidelity prototypes on their own,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Apart from that, I'm still a big user of Google Docs,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Easy for collaborations,
Hmm.
easy for these things. Of course, there are some new tools which are coming in, which are helping you to translate your data to your
Hmm.
insights to even to your product roadmap. For
Hmm.
example, tools like Product Board are there, or
Yeah.
AHA,
Hmm.
or Zeda,
Hmm.
that are doing that. I've not personally used all of
Hmm.
them,
Hmm.
but a lot of people
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
right? Apart from that, one thing which I also recommend my teams to do is they should know SQL
Okay.
if possible, right?
Hmm.
Because I think that reduces the dependency of a product manager
Hmm.
on the tech team or the product analytics
Hmm.
to go all the while and even look for smaller queries. Again,
Hmm.
it's my personal view. A lot of people they say, I'm not technical, why should I learn SQL?
Ah.
That's not my job,
Ah.
right? But I do believe it's like that one of those barn in
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
arsenal,
Yeah.
where which kind of helps you to move faster,
Hmm.
right? So that is one thing. And
Hmm.
the other thing which I strongly believe, product managers should be able to have some kind of a, at least an understanding of some analytical tool which is being used in the company.
Hmm.
Mixpanel, Amplitude, Clever
Hmm.
Tap, whatever they are using.
Yeah.
A product manager should be able to know,
Hmm.
how do I make sense out of this data?
Hmm.
What events do I want to
Yeah.
track?
Yeah.
What kind of a reporting do I need?
Hmm.
Right? So, for example, I have used Tableau quite extensively
Hmm.
in my product management days,
Hmm.
not of late.
Hmm.
But I do believe that this kind of frees up a product manager to be more, self-dependent,
Hmm.
to be able to run, and you're not going to your analytics team or your
Hmm.
product operations team every
Hmm.
single time to say that, can you generate that report for me?
Yeah. Hmm.
So those
Absolutely.
are some
Hmm.
of the tools
Hmm.
that I would.
My end of the day question to you,
Yes.
Malti. Uh, so we spoke about a lot of things, tools and etc. But lastly, coming to the one factor which we say ROI.
Hmm.
How do, as a product managers or product founders,
Hmm.
people measure the ROI of what they're building, what they're releasing, the features?
Hmm.
How
Hmm.
do they justify the ROI value?
See, I actually want to go back on this on a very, very simple this thing, right? I mean, of
Hmm.
course, ROI for a company would mean that, of course, I have invested on this.
Hmm.
How am I making returns on
Hmm.
that, right?
Hmm.
That is,
Hmm.
that's like table stakes,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Where you are looking at it, and that comes with a lot of connotation in terms of acquiring the user,
Hmm.
retaining the user,
Hmm.
LTV of the user, CAC of the user.
Hmm.
But I think I want to go one layer down
Hmm.
for that, Ankit, and I would say that when you are building any particular feature, I
Hmm.
think beyond your success metric, one thing you should start this question is that whatever you are building, what is the ultimate customer benefit?
Hmm.
Right? When you are putting your hypothesis,
Hmm.
you need to think that with me giving this to my customer,
Hmm.
what is the customer benefit? Am I saving their time? Am I
Hmm.
helping them do this job better?
Hmm.
Am I making their lives easier?
Hmm.
If yes, by how much? Because
Hmm.
the minute you kind of start thinking, instead of
Hmm.
saying that what does this feature delivery means as a success to my company,
Hmm.
instead of that, if you start wearing that customer hat and
Hmm.
you become that customer first thing, and you say that how does it benefit to my customer,
Hmm.
your metrics itself will change.
Yeah.
If I'm saying that I save time, by how much are you saving the time?
Hmm.
Right? For
Yeah.
example,
Absolutely.
imagine
Hmm.
you are a invoicing product.
Hmm.
Imagine if by automating that,
Hmm.
for example, are you saving, let's say, 30 seconds for
Hmm.
every invoice that the customer is generating?
Hmm.
And if that particular user is going to be generating 100 invoices in a day,
Hmm.
think of the kind of impact you have created,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would say, putting that value that you are
Hmm.
delivering, the
Hmm.
customer benefit, start from there.
Hmm.
And I think after that, we all get into the game of ROI with all the typical metrics
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
measurements. But I would say start from the customer benefit.
Great. It's been great listening to you, Malti, about all your insights. I think I've known you through multiple channels now, and multiple connects. But listening to you firsthand about your insights, how are you doing it? What product managers need to do, how product founders especially need to build culture, etc. It's so refreshing. Thanks for all your time today.
Thank you.
I love the insight. I'm sure audience gonna love it, but I hope you enjoyed it the
Oh,
most.
yeah, yeah. There was, as I was saying earlier, right? I mean, as much as I was sharing my perspective,
Mm,
it was lovely to see, especially the insights coming from a
mm,
founder
mm,
himself.
mm,
So thank you for, sharing some of the amazing things that you do
mm,
at
mm,
Heo and My
mm,
Operator.
mm.
It was lovely to hear, and I definitely have some very key takeaways which I can pass
I'm
on to,
glad.
the future startups with whom I work.
Sure. I'm glad you felt that. Thanks for
Thank you.
it.
Thank
Mm.
you.